Hey guys, this is John and Jackie of OpenLove101.com, and we have an amazing guest today. It's Roger Nygard. His claim to fame was Trekkies, but now he has a new movie coming out called The Truth About Marriage, and we're really here to talk to him about that today. Hey Roger, welcome to our show.
Hey guys, yeah, I'll talk about anything. So wherever you want to go.
Okay. Oh. Well, let's start with Trekkies.
Yeah.
How did that come about? I mean, that's a really well-known, popular film, and everyone really enjoys it. It really set the trend, I think, for documentaries of that time.
Yeah, well, it's the first of its kind of fan films. It was a study. Ultimately, in hindsight, I realized what I did. I didn't know what I was doing at the time. I was learning as I was going, being my first documentary, but it was a study of a subculture of people, of human beings, of fandom, Star Trek fans. And I had never made a documentary, wasn't interested in documentaries, never thought I'd make a documentary, but Denise Crosby, who was an actress who was in Star Trek The Next Generation, pitched the idea to me. I had cast her in my first feature film. It was a low-budget comedy called High Strung. And many years later, she said, someone should do a documentary about Star Trek fans. And I said, no one's done that yet? Of course, it's so obvious. And no one had. So we started shooting, and the footage was so colorful that we were hooked, and 9 months later, we had a film. I was hooked on documentaries, and so now The Truth About Marriage is my fifth documentary. Okay. And you'll see similarities amongst all my documentaries. They're all concept documentaries or sociological portraits of human beings. I guess I found out that's what I'm interested in. I become obsessed with a topic that's bothering me or intriguing me, and this is how I work it out, is by learning about it or probing or solving the mystery. You know, with Trekkies, it was these people are hilarious, they're obsessed, they're amazing. I think this will be interesting. And that's morphed into the current film. My core question is generally a question that I set out. I'm like the investigator. I'm going to solve a mystery. And the mystery was, why are relationships and marriage, why is it so hard for people? Because imagine I'm selling a product to you. You come into my store and you ask me, how is the product any good? So you're going to love it. Everybody's getting it. It'll bring great happiness to you and everyone's loving it. And you said, that sounds pretty good. I want that. What's it? Is there a guarantee? Nope, no guarantee, and 50% of them fail. And the other 50%, even though they keep working, take a lot of work to keep them, healthy and working, and proceeding. You better go back to the drawing board. There's something wrong with your product. And that's what I realized what marriage is. And so I set out to solve why is it the problem, and then look for some solutions.
Okay. And how did you come up with that idea? I mean, did you have problems in your own relationship?
Yeah. Well, I realized, first I thought, is it just me? Why am I such a failure at having a relationship? I had 3 times in my life where I was in love, and I had envisioned us getting married. We had talked about it sometimes and made plans, and then it fell apart. 3 times, I couldn't get to the altar, and I started to think I'll never do it. What's wrong with me? And that was my obsession, to figure it out. And then it wasn't just me, I noticed. Once I started researching, I looked up all the books, all the experts. I got a stack of books this high and started reading from all the psychologists, anthropologists, and experts on relationships and marriage, and to see what was going on. That took me like a year and a half, 2 years. And I'm taking notes, and it's like a dissertation, right? Or doing the forensic work to solve this crime that's been perpetuated on humanity, relationship problems. After a while, I've kind of starting to figure it out. Okay, I'm seeing why there's a problem, and here are all the solutions. And it doesn't do any good to have. I'm not going to publish a paper. But it gave me the questions to ask and the people to talk to, so I made my list of here are the experts. I put them on a map on my wall and see where they cluster, plan a trip to talk to all these people, and ask them these questions for a documentary. So I sent out emails. Whoever responded, that's who I interviewed. Not everybody did, and some it took a long time, like the Gottmans. I don't know if you've heard of John Gottman and Julie Gottman.
Yes.
Yes.
I realized that when I was talking to a lot of these psychologists, all of them were referring to the work of a handful of psychologists or researchers. And John Gottman is one of the researchers everyone refers to. So I thought, I've got to go to the Oracle himself. That was my final stop, essentially. When I finally got the Gottmans on tape, I knew I had a film. And the way I got them was persistence, first of all. I kept emailing and calling and no response. Finally, I got Katie, their publicist, their PR person, on the phone. She says, well, they don't do interviews. They only come into the office once a month now from the island. They live on an island off of Seattle. And they just don't do it. It can't be done. A lot of ways of saying no nicely. Yeah. But I'm persistent, and so I kept saying, well, I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I really would love to talk to them. I've talked to everybody else who they always refer to him, and I made a documentary about Star Trek fans called Trekkies, and then she stopped me. She said, John loves Star Trek.
There you go.
So that was my in. Got the Gottmans and had a mountain of footage and solved this mystery for myself, my own therapy about my own relationship problems.
Did it help you with the problems you were having in your relationships?
Yes. I mean, first of all, I feel so much better about myself, who I am, what kind of a species I am, what kind of a person I am, who I am as a person. Right. I'm much more accepting, and that's one of the solutions that the experts had, that the road to happiness starts with acceptance. First of yourself, who you are, what you need, what your needs are, and why should you be ashamed of what you are? It's not your fault. You are what you are, right? So first you have to understand who you are and come to an acceptance of it. And then the part two is the same for your partner. You have to accept your partner for who and what they are. And the Gottmans talk a lot about that 69% of relationship problems are never solved. They're just acknowledged, and then you dialogue about it, and then move past it. You have to accept things. Or you don't have to. It's only if you want to be happier.
Right?
That's true.
If that's your motivation. And so then they teach you how to accept. How do you move on to acceptance? Through empathizing with your partner. And they teach what empathy means, because a lot of people don't even understand really what that word means. And Julia Schwartz-Gottman talks about that in the film, that empathy is putting yourself in your partner's shoes and then saying, well, no wonder you're feeling that way. Of course, because, expressing empathy, it's about connection. Mm-hmm. And I'm a little bit jumping ahead, but if I was to tell you the most basic solution that I learned in making this documentary, okay, here it is. Here's the answer. Everybody, pay attention. Get your pencils. If I went on a tour, which I'm kind of doing, to teach people, if you could do one thing to improve the trajectory of your relationship, or improve the happiness and thereby improve the trajectory and maybe your chance for longevity as a couple, you have to understand that there's a masculine and a feminine energy, and we all have it to some percentage. Generally, men have more masculine and women have more feminine. That's obvious. But when you're in your masculine, what men have to do, or the masculine has to understand, is that the feminine needs connection. The feminine seeks connection all the time. And the way to connect properly, it's like a vitamin. The feminine and the masculine both need a vitamin, but they need a different vitamin. So the first thing you have to understand is that they need a different vitamin. We make the mistake of assuming our partner needs the same thing that we feel we need, but they don't necessarily. Mm-hmm. You have to give your partner what they need. And what the feminine needs is 15 to 20 minutes, I'm going to make it specific now, of listening every night. Connection.
That's true.
Honey, how was your day?
Yep.
How are you feeling? And then shut up. This is the hard part for the masculine, for men, is the shut up part. Because
they want to fix something.
Yes, they want solutions, they want to advise. She doesn't want your advice. She needs catharsis. She needs to just download her emotional feelings for the day. If you give her that 15 to 20, maybe it's 30, maybe it's 10 some night, whatever. But if you give her that, she'll feel much more satisfied as a person and about the relationship. That increases happiness, increases passion, everything gets better. Mm-hmm. If you can do one thing, men, masculine, one thing, try it as an experiment. What do you have to lose? 15 minutes, right? for a week, see what happens. And they say, and I've seen this happen, at the end of a week, 2 weeks, you're not going to want to stop because things will be so much better. Because once she's happier, then you're happier. Everybody, happy wife, happy life. There's some truth always behind these, these sayings. But the man has some feminine also, so he occasionally needs that as well to some degree. But
I need it a lot.
It could be a reverse. It's not a gender thing either. It's not about gay, straight.
Exactly.
Couples are meant to complete each other, not to be duplicates of each other. Right. So I'm almost done with my lecture on happiness. So that's what the masculine needs to provide for the feminine. Now the reverse. The feminine has to understand that the masculine also seeks connection. But when the man has his connection, he begins to yearn for freedom. And so then he goes through a cycle, he goes through an orbit. Connection, but then he wants freedom. And once he has freedom, he starts to yearn for connection. He misses her and wants to come back. So it's a natural orbit. And if you try to stop that orbit, try to get in the way of it, you're going to cause frustration and unhappiness, and eventually that comes out in anger or other negative ways. So the solution is to allow the masculine to go through its orbit, understand that it's normal and necessary. John Gray calls it the man going to his cave in Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus.
Right.
But the way the masculine has to perform this in a certain way. There's a way to do it that's better. And Dr. Bonnie Eaker-Weil, one of the psychologists, told me this. I thought it was brilliant, that the best way to do it is for the masculine is to announce your disconnection. It's when it's time. Honey, I'm going fishing with my buddies for the weekend. So now she knows you're disconnecting. But at the same time, announce when you'll reconnect. I'm going fishing for the weekend. I'm looking forward to seeing you for dinner Sunday night at 7 p.m. So now she knows when you're leaving, when you're coming back. She feels safe and secure. You have nothing to hide, and it's normal and it's expected, and it's necessary for maintaining passion. You need occasional separation and reconnection. Mm-hmm. If you're connected constantly, habituation sets in. You take each other for granted. The passion goes down. You start to think something's wrong with the relationship.
Something's wrong with me.
You start over again, and it never ends. So if I could just teach people those two things alone, there's many more in the film and in my book, but that's really key.
And Jackie, we actually tried that early in our relationship. We're in a more open relationship, and if I would go on a date and didn't define when I was coming back home, it could cause some anxiety. Mm-hmm. And the same thing for me. If she were to go and I didn't really have an idea of when we're going to reconnect, there would be some anxiety and some fear that would set in. And we found that by really defining what was going to happen, it could be open-ended. We could say, listen, I'm going to go out with her. I'll call you in 2 hours and let you know how it's going. If everything's going well, I might hang out with her another couple of hours. But at least there was that communication there in order that she could see when we were going to reconnect. I never thought of it in that way about the reconnection aspect, but it makes a lot of sense.
How important was it, though, that you keep your word? And if you say, I'll be home at 7 p.m., you come home at 7 p.m.
That's right. I mean, to me, that's part of the process of building that trust is holding to your word. It was really paramount that if John said he was going to call me at 11, that he called me at 11. That way, to me, I see our brains as kind of a file, and you upload things into that file, whether they're positive or negative. So the more positive things that I was able to put into that file of our relationship, the more likely I was to trust in the framing of that relationship, with it being more open. And so then I knew that he was going to go do those things, but then, we were always going to reconnect at the end of the day. And so it's about giving people permission to go through that process. And I think that creates a lot of fear for people. And so, you have all of these people that you interview and you have all this great information, but how do you get people to take that information and really apply it? Like you said, can you give yourself a week to do this completely different process than what maybe you were raised to view your relationship? I mean, how much emphasis does that fall on partners?
Yeah, well, it's a positive feedback cycle. Ideally, if you do it, you're going to feel results. and want to continue doing it. You want to continue to go well. And one thing I think you have to keep in mind is you can't abuse the privilege, or for instance, the 15 to 20 minutes per night. If you start making it an hour or 90 minutes, you're abusing it, and then that resource is going to dwindle. It's going to go away. You got to let the guy or the man or the masculine go watch the game after he gives your requisite time, and vice versa. If you're orbiting away, you can't abuse that privilege. You get a sense of how long it can be. John Gray's the cave thing is like 1 day per week is what it adds up to. So I mean, it's going to be different for every couple, but whatever it is, it's about being fair. One of the people in my documentary, when I was asking them for best advice, was his rules were ask for what you want and be kind.
Yes, I remember that.
You can combine those two things. Everything else can flow from those core principles. Being fairness, and be clear about what you want. Nobody's a mind reader.
Right. Well, and I also liked the couple that was in a more poly relationship. Some of the ways that they described their relationship didn't really have anything to do with ownership. And I think that can be something we can tend to do when we get into relationships, is we assume that this person belongs to us. And so then that will change how we're dealing with who they are in their sense of their freedom. We start to try to control what they can do or what they can't do. Mm-hmm. And so the whole premise, like you said, of the man with that freedom, I mean, I definitely think that can flow both directions.
Oh, you have some masculine in you too. Sometimes you need to disconnect.
Exactly. So, but it's about accepting that that's happening on both sides, and that you can still have a relationship without needing to have that ownership mentality about your partner. Like your partner, it's more about trusting the fact that they love you and they enjoy being where they are with you, instead of a fear-based, don't leave me, in order for you not to leave me, I have to control what you're doing.
Yeah, well, that certainly generally has the opposite effect of what you're trying to accomplish. Right. Eventually. Nobody wants to be controlled. It doesn't feel nice, and it's not natural for humans, because we're individuals. We're social beings that need connection, but we're also individuals. And we come from, part of the answer for why there's a problem in relationships came from the anthropologists, who found that human beings we evolved a certain way on the African savanna. It's called the savanna principle. All of our emotions and needs and wants evolved within that environment to deal with that environment. But now we have a new environment, new culture. Our culture has evolved faster than we have. Yep. And our culture asks us to behave in ways that are out of sync with what was natural in that more ancient environment. And so we're all frustrated trying to reach these levels, these ideals that are unreachable, or very difficult to maintain anyway. And then this frustration leads to problems. So here we are. What do we do about it? And the polyamorous couple in my film, Jordan and Angela, I found them surprisingly, maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but I was surprised at how high functioning they are as a couple. And I discovered that the reason that is because, not because they're polyamorous, it's because to be polyamorous, you have to be open about who you are, you have to have the discussions, and know what the rules are going in. Most relationships start out where it's like a mask dating a mask. We say what we think the other person wants to hear so they'll like us.
Yeah, so true.
But polyamory doesn't function that way. You have to be open in order for it to work. And openness is what leads to more longevity and a better trajectory for a relationship. I mean, you can probably tell me, how important is being open to maintaining a relationship?
It's the key. Open, honesty, and then the trust that goes along with it. And if you have a relationship that those three values are a part of it, you really see high success rates in relationships. At least we have in our community, which are people that are swingers and open relationships and poly relationships. So for sure. And I know we've seen that in ours as well. The relationship I have with Jackie is so different than any other relationship I had, where I wasn't able to be myself and be honest about who I was as a person. And in those kind of relationships, when you do that, it breaks down all the walls. If I can tell her everything about me, the hidden dark secrets about my past, and she's accepting of me in my past, our relationship's off to a great start.
Right. No, there's no surprise. Right. No unexpected surprise that gives you a shock and a reevaluation. And what am I doing here? This is not what I thought. And it's going to diffuse those in advance. Less likely to have those kind of problems, right?
Right. Well, and here's the thing. It's about, we talk a lot about, having trust in your partner to be able to tell them those things. But there's also that level of trust in your partner to receive that information. We say we want honesty in our relationship, but then as soon as somebody gets honest, we get offended, or our mouth falls open because we're shocked that what, or we take it offensively. And so it's about kind of changing that concept of, am I the person that can handle your truth, and that's what I find in our relationship model is something that's brought to the forefront. That seems to be, instead of saying, I really wish my husband knew this or my wife knew this about me. Well, why don't you tell them? Oh, I could never tell them that. They never understand. And I'm always like, well, that's supposed to be the one person you are supposed to be able to tell those things to. I mean, what? I mean, there's supposed to be that trust there. So, it's interesting. I know that this documentary took you a minute to make.
7 years.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, like, your perspective on your subject matter, how it changed from when you first started doing it to when you finished. I mean, can you feel the progress in your own self from doing that?
Oh my goodness, absolutely. When I started out, I was clueless. I mean, to a great extent. I had very little understanding of relationship dynamics, much less how to do it better or fix the problems. And I didn't know what I would discover. I just knew I would go into it and try to solve this problem. It was keeping me awake. And part of the beauty for me, of setting out on a journey like this is tracking down the top psychologists on the planet, many of them, and talking to them for 2 hours or so, interrogating them about what's bothering me, what's keeping me awake at night, is that at the end of the process, I got to download all of their wisdom and advice, which helped me as a person, and I'm much better prepared for my future next relationship or relationships, whatever happens. I mean, I'm open. Whatever happens, I'm ready and happy, and no longer have expectations that I feel like have to be fulfilled, or I got to fulfill them quickly, or I'm missing the boat. It's so wonderful to be able to come out of this experience being ready for future relationships, being much more prepared, I feel like, than I was before, and feeling much better about it. Instead of feeling like there's something wrong with me and I'll never be fixed, and I keep trying to fix it. And I'm much more accepting of who I am and what my needs are. And it's just about finding someone who has an understanding of what their needs are and accepting of your needs.
It's interesting. You talk to so many people. I mean, in the documentary, I couldn't believe the plethora of doctors that you had on there, that authors. And what's interesting is even though you're talking to all of these different people and they're all kind of coming to their own conclusions about relationships, there's still a cohesiveness in all of their messages. And what do you think that is?
They were basically saying the same thing in different ways. And that's what I coalesced into in the documentary, in the book, to the concrete advice at the end that you can take to your own relationship that anyone can do, like better listening, accepting that your partner needs to disconnect occasionally. And there are many other things, like there's something called capitalization, which researchers discovered that it goes along with the listening aspect. Let's say you come home at the end of the day and your partner tells you something great that happened during the day. Honey, this amazing thing happened, I got a raise, or the kids got the report card, or I found this great deal on a car, whatever. Capitalization is listening to that and then supporting it and going, honey, that's amazing. I'm so happy that happened for you. If you don't do that, it counts against you, and you have lost an opportunity to capitalize on your partner's good fortune or achievement. And when you do, it increases happiness for both, and it lasts all week, not just that night. They found a continuing effect when you capitalize on each other's good fortune. When I observed a passion workshop where couples came together, and there were these passion enthusiasts, they called themselves passion igniters, Satyan and Suzanne Raja. They teach couples how to regain their passion. Part of it is, first of all, being present and invitation. The female has to invite, and the masculine has to be present. But it's also, they teach to be expressive of your pleasure, because particularly the masculine needs to hear or witness that the feminine is enjoying herself. So they teach, make noise, show your pleasure, demonstrate it, because sometimes they've been taught or felt like they have to hold it in and not make a sound. Maybe that's from years of living, with thin walls and not wanting people, parents, neighbors to hear you. But the more you express yourself, the more that triggers, a pleasure sensory in the male or the masculine brain that wants his or her partner to feel pleasure. And orgasm is maybe the highest level of physical and mental pleasure. So if you watch and enjoy your partner having an orgasm, what better expression is there for you, for your partner, than to want them to feel pleasure and to be happy and enjoy themselves?
Right? Without that being a threat.
There's no
it's
threat,
so
right?
interesting that
What's the threat?
Right? Like your partner's happy and you have a problem with that, but like there may be something that you want to look at if that's what's going through your head. Yeah, it's crazy.
And I hadn't really thought about it in that way, but when seeing you have an orgasm does bring me a tremendous amount of joy. Yeah, that, and even just traveling together and seeing new things and seeing your excitement when we see new things. And I get so much happiness out of that. I love seeing when you have a huge smile and we've experienced something new in our travels somewhere. But really with the orgasm aspect of it, it's mind blowing how that makes me feel when I see her do that, whether it's with me or someone else. But it just, it's really an interesting concept how that couple really teaches you to express yourself in that way. And for men, I've noticed it's really difficult for men a lot of times. And we see couples all the time in our clubs. And the men a lot of times are really quiet.
It's so bizarre to me to think about how they prepare you for maybe the business world. You learn math and English and gym class. But to have a relationship, you have to go out and figure it out and make mistakes. And everyone's making the same mistakes kind of needlessly. One quick course could teach you so much.
That's really, really interesting. So, like, if you had an opportunity to come up with a curriculum for something like that, what would that look like?
Well, it's all in my documentary. So I would start there. I would screen the film.
Okay.
I've screened the film, The Truth About Marriage, at 24 film festivals, and it always leads to a really spirited Q&A. People want to talk about their relationships, and they have questions for me. And I didn't really think about that was going to happen. It makes sense in hindsight. Yes, of course. People will ask me about how to fix their relationship.
Is there something specific that's happening at each one of those, like a generalized question that they're wanting to know?
It's usually fear of doing the right thing that they know that they should do.
Ah.
That's the most common basis I've noticed for their questions. They know that they need to do something, but they're afraid to do it, and they're looking for some advice. You need to set your boundaries with people in a polite way that they may not like it, but they'll respect you for telling them what you want. Ask for what you want. Live your life the way you need to live it. And if you're afraid to ask for what you want, then you won't be happy. It's hard up front. Take your lumps up front. That's the hard part, is getting there. And a lot of relationship problems have to do with conflict. When there's a disagreement, there's conflict. So part of the documentary in my book is about how to do conflict better. And counselors spend a lot of time with their couples on this. One of the ways to do conflict better is to understand that the feminine brain is better equipped for handling emotions and talking about emotions and processing emotions. The male brain has about 15 minutes before it floods. It's called flooding. It gets overwhelmed and frustrated, and then that leads to anger. So, how do you handle that? Concrete advice. If, let's say you wanted, honey, I want to talk about the garage. Honey, I want to talk about which school the kids are going to go to. Honey, I want to talk about the cleanliness of the house. When is a good time that we could discuss this? Set an appointment and say, when could we talk about this? Hopefully later today or tomorrow morning if today's not good. Once you get a time, write it down, because then it's real. Until it's written down, it's hazy memories.
Right.
And I don't remember, did we say that? Write it down. It's on a piece of paper. Now, 2 o'clock tomorrow, we're going to discuss the garage. This gives the male brain time to adjust to the idea that we're going to have a discussion. Because they don't like ambush discussions. They're not good with it. They're better off with setting a time and then limit the time of the discussion to 15 minutes each, maybe, or 5 minutes each, whatever. Put some constraints on it so that you don't go off. You're forced to kind of stay on topic when you know you've got to make your point within 10 minutes. You can't go off on a million tangents and red herrings and complaining about everything. Focus on it. That's a better way to do conflict. Mm-hmm. You don't have to do it that way, but if you want a better result, that's one of the suggestions that I learned from one of the psychologists.
Mm-hmm. And that way you don't go into the 15-minute realm when the guy explodes and loses his cool. And
yeah.
Right.
You get a better result. And here's another piece of advice that they teach. Stephanie Kuntz, who is a historian, she told me this about, she tells women, when you want an outcome, don't be afraid to say to your husband, your man, the masculine, honey, I would like to do one of these 4 things, 3 or 4 or 5 things. Give him choices. Instead of saying, honey, I want to do this one thing or I'm going to be upset, give him a menu of choices and don't be afraid to put in there something he won't like. But they're all 4 or 3 ones you're willing to do. Like, example, where to go on vacation this year. Right. You can't decide. Well, narrow it down for him. Pick one of these, honey, and then let him choose. Then he'll feel like he's still the boss.
Still involved in the solution of it.
Right. But really, who's the boss? And one of the questions in my documentary, I asked people, who's the boss in most relationships,
I was
the man
really
or the woman?
surprised by that.
Yeah.
Can you guess what everyone says? The woman. It's unanimous. And I was shocked at how unanimous that was.
I was shocked by how unanimous that was.
Everyone, they know it's a basic truth. If you've ever experienced a relationship, eventually you got to understand that. Yeah. So why is that? There's got to be a reason. And I think partly it's women make better long-term decisions. We come from a matriarchy. Human tribes or bands were matriarchal originally.
That's true. We are.
They made the long-term decisions. The masculine brain is arguably better at short-term decisions, which are based on threat, but long-term decisions, which are a little more conservative, and So who's going to make the long-term decisions ultimately? I'm going to buy this fishing boat, honey. Oh, hold on. We got to pay for braces in private school, and that's going to give. So let's discuss that, right? Dr. Pat Allen puts it this way. She says, there's one president and one vice president, and the vice president is in charge of veto rights. And if you've got the veto right over everything, you're actually the boss of the president.
Oh,
wow.
That's a good point.
So the president's making decisions, but then the vice president, if the president gets out of line, says, oh, hold on, get back in line here. Interesting. The way the polyamorous couple put it, Jordan and Angela, Jordan said that Angela, she sets the parameters of the playground, and then I get to fill it up with toys.
Yeah.
Huh.
Out of all the couples and relationships, and there were probably some that didn't make the film, I would imagine. I mean, you
Yes.
interviewed a lot of people. Is there a particular type of relationship that you felt seemed to be more successful, or people were more happy than maybe others?
There's two ways to answer that question. And one is that people make an assumption sometimes that the more conflictual a couple is, the more they fight, the less stable it is. But what the evidence suggests is it's not the amount of fighting that matters. It's and this is John Gottman again, who did this research. Yes. It's the ratio of positive to negative interactions that indicates how stable a relationship is. And so what he found is that the most stable couples have a 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative behaviors. So a negative behavior is rolling your eyes, sighing, passive aggressiveness, unhappiness, sadness, withdrawal, take your pick.
I don't do any of those, by the way.
Everybody does it. And then positive behaviors are, of course, laughing at your partner's jokes, touching them on the arm, a hug, flowers, gifts, trips, positive interactions. You need to have 5 positives for every negative. So if there's a lot of fighting, that means a lot of positives. Mm-hmm. If you rarely fight, flowers once a year might be enough to keep it stable. And he said the masters of relationships go as high as 20-to-1, positive to negative. So you can't really overdose on positive. You can't have too many honeys, you look wonderful today. Honey, you look so nice. Honey, great job on your work. I'm so proud of what you did today.
Yeah.
That's one way one thing I've discovered about what a successful relationship entails.
Do you feel as though you're open to any type of these relationships at this point? All these relationships that you saw, the different relationship models, are you open to all of them? Are you still feeling as though the type of relationship you've been in the past is the way you would go? Has your thought pattern changed on that at all?
Here's what I am now, here's the realization I've now come to, is that I've now learned and changed my opinion that the only relationship I'm interested in is one that is open, is honest, that I can be myself with my partner. Right. I am tired of being a mask, trying to hold up a mask, because society requires me to be this, that, or the other thing. The happiest relationships for me so far, where I've felt like I made the most success, are the ones where I could be myself. And it's kind of weird that usually that started when I would date somebody I wasn't that interested in. So I didn't feel like I had to put on a mask. I didn't really care. So I don't really care what you think, so I'm just going to be myself. And then suddenly we're together for 3 years.
Wow.
Because being honest or being who I am, if you don't like me, I don't care, right? It's that kind of thing. Ricky Gervais hosting the Golden Globes.
Yes.
I don't care. I don't care, right? It was kind of joyous to watch him be so free with who he was. So I'm only interested in going forward in relationships where I can be myself.
That's just a really great point. Yeah.
And it takes a special person to reciprocate that. And that's harder to find in our current culture.
Okay, so in our current culture, we all know that critical mass is that like 10% shift. Is this documentary going to do that?
I would love to hope so. You never know what's going to catch the zeitgeist and take off, and sometimes you get a little ahead of the curve and it catches Malcolm Gladwell's tipping point, and then suddenly everybody's talking about it.
Right.
I mean, my first film, Trekkies, was the first of its kind and launched a wave of fan documentaries. I didn't know that was going to happen. I just thought this was an interesting subject, and I pursued it. My second documentary was about UFO fanatics, 6 Days in Roswell.
Oh, that's right.
And it has a core audience of people, but it didn't really catch a big wave. I made a documentary. My prior documentary is called The Nature of Existence. What I was most obsessed with before the marriage documentary was existentialism. And my core question that I was investigating, that I set out to solve the mystery, was, why do we exist? And I went out and I solved it for myself in terms of arriving at a place of peace, where for me I was much more happy and healthy, having understood better what is my purpose in life. And that actually is what led to the marriage documentary. I'm going to answer a question you asked earlier. I was at a screening in Dallas, Texas, at the USA Film Festival, and inevitably the question comes up, what's your next topic? What's your next project? Somebody asked that, and so as a joke, it just came to me. I said, well, I just solved the nature of existence itself. The only topic that's even more inexplicable than that would be marriage. Got a big laugh.
Right.
And I thought, maybe there's something to that joke.
Yeah.
And I started thinking, it kept me thinking. And I began to pursue it. And I know I'm onto something when I get excited.
Right.
And I got really excited the more I looked into relationship issues and solving that mystery.
Do you think maybe we're getting to a point in society where we're becoming more accepting of a wider array of relationship models? I know you really touch on it in your documentary, and I really love that. Is, you know, how can we give people permission to have whatever relationship works for them, instead of trying to, you know, have this lemming mentality where we're all jumping off the cliff, but maybe nobody really knows why.
Yeah.
You know, except for maybe the head guy.
Well, the answer is yes. And the way to get permission is to be courageous, to live your life the way you need to live your life to be yourself. As long as you're not hurting anybody, that's where I would draw the line. If you're not hurting anybody, however you want to live your life, be courageous about it. Be yourself, be who you are.
Mm-hmm.
You have a much greater opportunity for happiness and joy about life if you can live honestly about who you are. And yes, I think it is increasing. There is so much available about other lifestyles on the internet now that wasn't available to people 20 years ago. It's very easy to research or to look up or find your core group, to find your people, and to suddenly find out, wow, there's a lot of my people out there who
Right.
feel the same way I feel. Because human beings are essentially, we're all the same inside. We all want love and acceptance, enough income to feed our family or just to be comfortable. And we're pretty, our needs are pretty simple, ultimately. And there's a reason why our culture has asked us to behave in a way that's out of sync with who we are, which was part of in order to get to the solutions, I had to learn why we're having the problems. And I learned a lot about this from interviewing Christopher Ryan, who wrote Sex at Dawn, who studied this in his book.
It's a great book.
Elaborates
Great book.
on it extensively, that we originally lived in these small bands of 150 or fewer people. It's called Dunbar's number. Robin Dunbar is a British anthropologist who discovered that human beings can interact on an emotional level with up to about 150 people. That's all we can kind of keep track of in our brain. And once you get beyond that, let's say you're at 150, give or take, if a new one comes in, someone gets bumped. And that comes from being able to keep track of who's pulling their weight in the tribe, who owes you a favor, who's not pulling their weight. Reciprocal altruism is another term that they have for that, which churches or religions call it morality. It's another word for morality, right? Doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Tribes, our ancient tribes that we used to live in, needed that as a way for us to interact. Remember who's pulling their weight. Now, today, we live in big cities, there's billions of people on the planet. That doesn't work anymore. So a new social order had to come into existence. And that happened about 6,000 years ago, 6 to 10,000 years ago, when humans discovered agriculture. At that point, the idea of ownership, being proprietary, that occurred to human beings because we stopped being nomads, stayed in one place, grew crops, said, this is mine, these crops, this land, these animals, this family, this woman, mine, belongs to me. And a natural, I guess it's natural for humans, a natural outgrowth of that was for the man who's now the owner of these things, was to be sure that he's passing on his belongings to his genetic offspring.
Right.
How can you be certain? How can he be certain that's his genetic offspring? A woman knows it's her baby. Comes out of her body,
Right.
no doubt about it.
Right.
A man can't be 100% sure unless he's practiced what they call mate guarding 24/7, keeping an eye on her. And marriage was invented, it came about, it's a way of creating a social fence around the woman's sexual behavior. So a man could know it's his baby.
Wow.
So if you look at the biblical, like the Bible or religious texts, there's a lot of talk about adultery being a sin for women,
Yeah.
not so much for men.
No, not so much for men.
The punishment is mostly against women. Men were not allowed to covet the neighbor's wife or daughter, but everyone else is fair game. But the women, the wife can't covet anybody.
Right.
And that's because men were trying to control the sexual behavior of women. So it's a little ironic, if women are clamoring to be married today, they're clamoring to be encased and have their choices encased in the social fencing. But it became necessary because, here's the next step in the last piece of the puzzle here, after agriculture was discovered and then proprietary became the way of living, an outgrowth of that became polygamy. Some men became more wealthy than others and began collecting wives until the sultans, the kings, the pharaohs had upwards of 5,000 concubines and maybe a handful of wives. But that meant there's 5,000 young men without any women who are very frustrated, and that leads to social unrest. The solution was to enforce monogamy on everyone, including the sultan and the king. Everyone gets one man, one wife, so that society can be more stable. And then they refocus their energies away from trying to get women toward economic endeavors. So they had to go underground.
Yeah.
Polygamy continues today. We still practice it, but it's called serial monogamy.
Yes.
Yes.
You have to throw away the old one before you can take on a new one publicly.
That's right.
But in the old days, they kept them all.
Yes. Yes. Oh, well, I've never thought of it like that.
No.
That's what we're dealing with today, and that's why cheating is going on, and people are hiding mistresses and all of their dalliances. They've got to keep it keep it hidden because socially you're only allowed one.
And it's interesting because I was just talking about this last night with someone. We tend to think like peer pressure is something that only kids deal with, but it's adults. That your example is a perfect example of why. I can't let anybody know this. I have to uphold this image in society to be able to maintain what I have. When in essence, there's just millions of people that aren't following the social norm. It's just nobody knows about it, or we don't talk about it. And it's so weird that that's okay.
The norm is not to talk about it.
Right. The norm is to be deceitful about
Yes.
it, in essence. And it's weird to me as a society that we're more okay with that than we are with being honest.
Yeah, with being honest about our type of relationship. And that's what we're talking about as a couple that can't tell anyone about the kind of relationship that they're in because they'll be judged by their peers.
Right.
Yeah.
Fear of
If you
reprisal.
just don't talk about cheating, that's definitely much more accepted in our society today. It's really sad.
Yeah, and then what is cheating? You have to define that too as a couple.
Right, because what does that mean?
Is it looking at porn? Yeah. Is it getting a massage with a happy ending?
Thinking about somebody else?
Right. How do you police thoughts? Freud had something to say about that.
He did.
He mentioned, Freud talked about how that when a spouse has a sexual dream of some kind, it's rarely about their wife or husband. It's about someone else. And so what does that tell you?
Right.
You can't, if you try to control it, it's going to come out in other ways.
Yeah.
Look at it's like the Tiger Woods syndrome or the Arnold Schwarzenegger syndrome. I'm sure Maria Shriver knew what was going on, or Tiger's wife, Ellen. They knew what they signed up for. But once it became public, they had to go through the obligatory separation dance.
Yep.
Because that's what society requires.
Well, hopefully this can be a stepping stone to changing that.
Man, I hope so. I'm so glad you did this. I mean, it's like somebody needs to to tell people it's okay to just be who they are. It's not, it's not about stepping outside of societal lines or anything like that, because really it's more about you accepting you more. That's where that happens.
Only if you want to be happier.
Yeah, what? Exactly. Yeah, only if you want to be happier, do this.
It's a cost-benefit analysis, right? We do it every day, all the time, cost-benefit analysis. If I go to the store now, will I save money or time versus do it later? Look at relationships, cost-benefit analysis. We look at everything. Being honest with who I am will give me a benefit in happiness, but maybe it'll be a cost with my social group who will disapprove. So I have to keep it secret. But as more and more people begin to become more accepting and honest about who and what they are, it opens up the ability for others to do so.
There you go.
And so, yeah, I mean, I make a documentary not to advance a cause. I don't set out to prove a point, advance an agenda. I look at it as I just want to know the truth. I set out to I want to know what's going on here and let the cards fall where they may. One of the psychologists I interviewed, William Doherty, was at a film festival screening, and the question came up, because I'm single. Why should we listen to a single guy talking about marriage? What right do you have to talk about marriage?
Who do you think you are?
Yeah.
So who do you think you are?
I'm an objective outsider looking in and trying to understand something. And Dr. Doherty, he answered the question as well at the film festival. He said, when Roger came to interview me, he asked me all these seemingly naive questions about marriage and was willing to go wherever it took him. Whereas when someone who has been married comes to him, they already have a theory of marriage. And they are looking to him to acknowledge what they already believe.
Right. I want you to affirm what I think I know.
Right. So he said it was the most interesting interview he'd ever had, because he never experienced that before, where someone came in just with asking these questions that would just go wherever it went. And that's how I look at making my documentaries. I'm going to just go wherever it takes me.
Yeah.
And it's taken me to your living room.
And I love that.
It's been great. Roger, it's been great talking to you today. We have really learned a tremendous amount. We really love the film. Can you please tell our audience where they can find it?
Sure. It's called The Truth About Marriage. And people are pretty smart about searching the web. Search The Truth About Marriage. Go to my website, thetruthaboutmarriage.com. And you can find a link to where the video is located or the book. Either one you can find.
That's right, there is a book too.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's so much information that I couldn't fit it all into a documentary. And I really wanted to focus on concrete, simple things that anyone could do to improve their relationships. And ultimately, it leads toward being more open about who you are.
And we love the film. We really highly recommend it to you guys. The Truth About Marriage. It's fantastic. There's so much great information in there. And also Roger will mention some authors and books they've written that can give you additional information about humanity and relationships that we're in. So really check it out. Thanks for joining us today. OpenLove1010.com. Sign up for our email list. Subscribe to our YouTube channel here and hit the little bell if you'd like to be notified of upcoming videos. Thanks for joining us.
See ya.
Great job on that video. And if you guys enjoyed it, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and you'll be able to see plenty more.